morning, everybody. Good afternoon and good evening, wherever you're dialing. Welcome to our webinar. My name is Mehmet Tulbek. I'm the president of the Saskatchewan Food Industry Development Center. Today, I'll be talking about an overview of the global fermented pulse-based foods, processing technology, nutrition, and commercial applications. I'll just give you a snapshot about how fermentation can be used in different food applications and ingredient applications, especially in pulse-based foods. And we'll be celebrating the World Pulses Day, which was established back in 2016 when we had celebrated the Year of the Pulse, International Year of the Pulse. So with that, Saskatchewan is really an important province in Canada as well as in the world. We are growing a significant amount of pulse crops, peas, lentils, chickpeas, fava beans, and utilizing them in North America as well as exporting it everywhere in the world. So it's quite important for us, and we have the technical expertise and growing more and more at Food Center on this technical expertise. So with that, I'd like to start with an introduction of our Food Center, then go through some of the World Pulses Day, and explain some of the things about the pulses and the composition, and do an introduction to pulses. Then we'll get into fermented pulse foods and talk about some additional insights about the fermented pulse products and ingredients. So if you look at the Food Center has been established in 1997 as a development and innovation agency in Saskatchewan. It's been established as a not-for-profit organization, as a company. We have strong focus on local crop and meat utilization, plant-based food ingredients. We have over 55 full-time employees dedicated to supporting the agri-food sector in Canada. Over the last 22 years, we have over 1,000 products developed and processed at the Food Center. We basically served over 450 clients and helping all sectors in the food and processing industry. And we basically conduct our mandate with 4 pillars by creating, connecting, collaborating, and commercializing. We're helping the companies reduce their capital risk. We support entrepreneurship. We support startup companies. We expand and drive the innovation with Saskatchewan agricultural inputs in development and processing of plant-based foods. We also support the commercialization of new technology, research, and development. We are based in Saskatchewan. We have a global footprint with outreach with several different countries in Canada, as well as in US, South America, Mexico, Northern Europe, Middle East, South Asia, Asia Pacific, China, Japan, and Australia, New Zealand. And one of the reasons that we work with all these groups, not only because of the Food Center, but also because of the ecosystem growing in Saskatoon. Saskatoon is a major science and technology hub with so many groups here with NRC, AFC, University of Saskatchewan, Synchrotron, Agwest Bio, GAP, with so many different groups. It's a major hub, science and technology hub, and the processing hub that helping the overall food and the growing biotech ecosystem in Canada as well as in North America. So when we look at our technical programs and outreach, in the center is the agri-food utilization. And around that, we have product development, extrusion, R&D, food grade crop quality, manufacturing, incubation, ingredient science and technology, food safety skills development, as well as we have a federally funded Prairie Scan Canada funded Women in Agri-Food Entrepreneurship Program. We have over 300 women entrepreneurs supporting them in different areas, different businesses, and they utilize pulses, and there's so many products coming up in these businesses as well. And the new program that we are adding is the fermentation and the bioengineering. So we have 2 processing facilities, one our pilot plant, another one is the Agri-Food Innovation Center. Both facilities are certified facilities by CFIA. We can produce meat, dairy, processed foods, honey, ASIP certified, BRC, organic allow. We have a wide variety of capabilities, diverse flexible equipment. We have trained operators, commercial manufacturing, and 5 incubation suites. The companies, they can come, rent the facility, utilize the services. So it's a one-stop shop in Western Canada, in Saskatoon, from ingredient selection to R&D trials, to ingredient testing, to product development and scale up manufacturing and commercialization. We help clients confidentially in several different aspects of their businesses. So we'd like to start going through the World Pulses Day and the introduction to the pulses. So World Pulses Day is a designated United Nations global event to recognize the importance of pulses, especially chickpeas, dry beans, lentils, dry peas, and lupins, among others. There are over 52 market classes of pulses according to FAO designation, FAO classification as a global food. It's been proclaimed on February 10th of each year since 2019 by the General Assembly of the United Nations on December 20, 2018. The celebration, basically, it's a recognition of the decisive role that pulses can play in achieving the comprehensive, far-reaching, and people-centered set of universal and transformative goals and targets of the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and a plan of action that seeks to strengthen the universal peace. So several reasons for that. First of all, the pulse crops, they have a lower carbon footprint than most foods, and because they require small amount of fertilizer to grow. They also use low water footprint. They have much lower footprint and adapted to semi-arid and sometimes arid conditions. They can tolerate drought stress. And it's not only the sustainability factor, but pulses can be quite inexpensive, easy to store, highly nutritious. They enhance soil microbiome, they break disease cycles, and really very important for the farmers' rotational benefits. So it's an opportunity, and every year we are celebrating it in different parts of the world. We are cooking different products, we are celebrating it with different events, we are sharing recipes. And basically, we are creating more awareness and utilizing more pulse crops around the world since 2019. So if you look at the pulses, there's been quite a bit of discussion around that in terms of the specifications and in terms of their classifications. Pulses, they're under this legume family, Fabaceae, or the Leguminosae species. And the legumes, they basically refer to the plants with fruits, with seeds enclosed in a pod, and include basically more than 600 genera, over 13,000 species. And if you look at that alfalfa, clover, fresh peas, lupins, soybeans, peanuts, they're all part of the whole food legumes family. But the pulses, basically, they're coming up like almost a specific subsegment of the legume family, which is over 52, 53 market classes according to FAO definitions. And that's because of there's so many different edible beans available, and dried peas, cowpeas, pigeon peas, broad beans, lentils, and chickpeas. So pulse comes from a Latin word called pulse, meaning thick soup or porridge. The pulses are the edible seeds of the plants in the legume family. And that porridge, that thick soup, is coming from the starch and primarily the amylose portion of the starch, because they create the gel. And because of that, it's almost like quite differentiated among the other food legumes like peanuts or fresh peas and the fresh beans as well. So if you look at the composition of the pulses, they are quite rich in terms of carbohydrates, proteins, fiber, and also there are some minor components like fats, some simple sugars, and they are quite rich in terms of minerals like ash. So if you look at the overall the composition, the pulses, depending on the market class, they can have proteins from 21 to 35%. And in general, lupins, they tend to be high, around 32 to 35, fava beans about 29, 30, peas about 21 to 23. Now with the new varieties and new efforts, they're going up to 25, 27, 28. Lentils about 21 to 24, chickpeas 20 to 23. In general, pulse crop as a whole crop has about 37 to 50% starch and 65% amylopectin and about 35% amylose. So there's about 13 to 22% fiber and 2 to 13% fat. And in general, lupins and the chickpeas, they tend to have high fat levels. We are looking at about 2% simple sugars. And in general, they provide several other benefits like being non-GM, gluten-free, low allergen, and they provide almost like a superfood concept in any type of formulation or food product. If you look at the history of the pulses, basically it goes back to thousands of years, even before the Roman Empire. And there's been quite a bit of literature and information about the pulses during the the Roman Empire. But again, if you look at the chickpeas, it goes back to Fertile Crescent, northern Iraq, northeast of Syria, and southeast of Turkey. And there's been evidence that domesticated about 7000 BC. Fava beans coming mainly from Eurasia and North Africa. And the edible beans, there's some evidence talking about over 7 million years ago, mainly from the Native American group and the different diets coming from America, southern on the Central American continent. So these are the main areas that we are looking at. And if you look at how the cultivation and the evolution of the pulses, the colonialism followed with the French Revolution, paved the road for the first wave of pulse evolution during the 16th century. Edible beans basically introduced to Europe from Africa to Asia, and the peas, it's introduced to North America around 18th century. So, and there's been some early genetical and classification taxonomy studies by Carolus Linnaeus, mainly on the edible beans, Gregor Mendel on edible peas, and early food preservation studies like Nicola Appert on the canning. So when we look at all the studies and the activities going on in that area, it's been going back the last 600 years. In additional benefits and how it's grown in North America in particular, it's really the adaptation of the drill air seeders that really transitioned to no-till farming. And then with the introduction of the no-till growing cycles and the growing practices since the late 70s, we did see significant growth of the pulses in North America. And that basically helped to reduce to summer fallow acres, and it brought additional rotational benefits. And really United Nations and the global agricultural food and the business communities really recognized this importance significantly, the sustainability, along with the food and the health benefits. So, and when we look at certain areas, especially a summer fallow versus and rotational crops, there's quite a bit of benefit in terms of water use and in terms of the soil health benefits, especially regarding the evapotranspiration, the water use of the land. So because of all these growth over the last 40, 50 years, the global pulse production increased over 95 million metric ton by 2022. And by 2020, if the yields go up, if all the production goes up, and if you can keep up opening up more acres, more rotation, and more growth maybe in Africa, we can see about 135 million metric ton of pulse production expected. And if you look at the overall growing regions, Canada, United States, Northern Tiers, South America, Brazil, some Paraguay, Uruguay, Eastern Africa, from mainly going down the way, all to Malawi, South Africa here, Southern Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, India, Northern China, and Australia. These are the main areas that has been major growth in the pulse production, but there are other countries in Europe, Turkey, and so many different parts of the world, they grow the pulses, but it's not at that level. In terms of the benefits of the sustainability, we talked about that, and Pulse Canada over the last 25 years, they've been doing significant amount of work in this area, so much data, information published regarding the rotational benefits, regarding the overall the rhizobium bacteria, the fertilizer benefits, the breaking the disease cycles, reducing the overall fertilizer use with the non-renewable energy inputs, as well as the lower carbon footprint. So there's quite a bit of information out there, and these are all showing the benefits of the pulses for the long-term sustainability. So when we look at the growth in the plant-based food industry over the last 2 decades, pulses have transitioned to be a major alternative ingredients for the plant-based food industry. Not only they are being used as whole and split pulses, but they are being used also as flours, as proteins, as starches, as fibers, and as well as different transformed ingredients. And these transformed ingredients happen to be like TVP, texturized vegetable proteins, can be manufactured by extrusion technology, can be tofu, more like acid and enzyme treated, and the coagulation of the proteins can be done with chickpeas, can be done with fava beans, can be done with peas, and it's an extension of the soybean processing. So in this space, we are seeing a lot of extension to the soybean processing. If you look at texturized vegetable proteins, it was an extension of soy. Overall, the texturized soy proteins, they've been out there the last 50 years. Now we are seeing a lot of texturized pulse proteins. Tofu, like a non-soybean tofu, is growing in that space. Pasta is an extension of gluten-free. More need high in protein products, so we replace more rice, we replace more corn, and we bring higher protein pasta by bringing the pulses. Then beverages and the dairy analogs are coming. So over the last 10 years, we are expecting about, like we've been observing, from 5 to 7% increase in the pulse ingredient global market increase. And if it goes like this, last year we had about 20.7 billion United States dollars of the global pulse ingredient market. Now in 2027, we're expecting to be about $26 billion. So it's growing and growing further. And additional benefits of the pulses, although they are low in terms of sulfur-rich amino acids like methionine and cysteine, these are really good proteins. They have very high levels of lysine and very high levels of alanine and glutamine, and there's so many additional benefits. Although they are low in cysteine and methionine, they can be a great protein for the complete protein resources, especially combined with cereals, combined with different type of oil seed proteins like hemp or canola proteins or other type of cereal proteins, rice proteins as well. So it's a really great resource, and it basically helps that the plant protein market to balance the protein level as well as the protein content. So what are we looking at in the new frontiers for the pulses, especially in the fermentation? And this is basically going back again, the overall historical context, how it evolved over the last several thousand years, and what type of products we can utilize, and in the history, how these products are being utilized. And here there are some pictures of idli product from India and the tempeh product from Indonesia, and a couple other more like a natto-based different products from India and northern India as well. And I put here as a vegetable-based fermented product, and there are also other new innovations coming in this space by using fermentation to come up with vegetable-based, plant-based fermented meat analogs. So these are all the new frontiers for us, which we can look at and which we can innovate. And if the price and if the transformation cost and if the overall system works, there are so many opportunities that we can look at. So when we look at this, why fermented pulses and the pulse ingredients? So really the main thing, going back to the fundamentals of the fermentation. Why do we utilize fermentation? We use fermentation for health and nutrition, and that's really one of the factors that's grown over the years. And that aids the chronic disease control. It brings a lot of healthy gut flora for balance and diversity. And there are so many components being produced during the fermentation process, whether it's the bioactive peptides, exopolysaccharides, phenolics. Some of them, they are being reduced, some of them, they are being developed. We are looking at production of some gamma aminobutyric acid, melatonin. So there are so many components, the microorganisms, depending on the culture, the starter culture, and the base we are using. These components can be really beneficial for the consumers. Then the most fundamental reasons we use fermentation over the last 4,000 or 5,000 years is the food safety and the quality control, lowering the pH to making the products more safe, and using more indigenous lactobacillus or rhizopus or bacillus or the different leuconostoc, different type of species, to keep these products more safe and the long-term stability. And the new areas driving this is really the functionality. Can be an ingredient or can be a food. And here we are looking at more the manufacturing of enzymes, manufacturing of proteins or emulsifiers or flavors or hydrocolloids or synthetic compounds. The other benefit is, of course, the sensory attributes can be also for techno-functional properties. And another factor can be for sustainability and the circular economy benefits, because some of the byproducts and co-products can be a great substrate for the fermentation applications to produce something else. So that's another benefit that we are looking at. So because of all the reasons, the fermented pulses and the pulse-based ingredients can be quite important. And we need to innovate and look at different applications, value proposals, and valorization in this area. So if you look at the fermented pulse foods, especially in a historical content, pulses have been used for centuries using traditional processing techniques such as soaking, fermentation, steeping, germination, boiling, roasting, frying, and drying processes. And historically, the spontaneous fermentation is mostly used for fermented pulse food, like by using a mother, like a culture ferment. So basically, they use that mother culture and then they use it again, almost like the traditional way of yogurt making. And there are so many examples of it, especially in the tempeh or like eftazimo, more like fermented chickpea bread applications in Crete Island, in Greece, in Turkey, in Indonesia, and different parts of India. However, better and the improved fermentation techniques in terms of specific strain development, whether to use a specific starter culture, have been introduced over the years, and that really helps for the product consistency, for nutritional quality, for microbial safety, as well as for the product yield. So these are the main factors driving that. So if you go back to Good Food Institute's definition about the fermentation, we are looking at a couple of fermentation technologies here. The first one is the traditional fermentation. And in this one, we are looking at the intact live organisms, and we are looking at the modulation and the process development of the plant-based foods or ingredients, and mainly it's about the flavor and nutrition and texture. So in this traditional fermentation, we consume the final product with all the live microorganisms in it. The second one is more like a biomass fermentation. This is mainly for fast growth and high protein growth platform for microorganisms, and the biomass here serves as the primary ingredient of a particular product. And in this one, we may be looking at the protein production, single cell type production that may be a different biomass, but at the end we produce a protein. And we are looking at some downstream processing and some separation or drying type of processes. And the third one is the precision fermentation. In this one, the microbial hosts being used as specific functional ingredients, and they may require much more purity and downstream processing, more isolation systems. But again, in these specific ingredients enable improved sensory, functional, or the sustainability attributes. So here, if you look at the types of the fermentation processes for pulses, we can look at a solid state fermentation. This can be alkaline as well as can be acidic. We can look at semi-solid state fermentation, as well as we can look at submerged, more like a liquid fermentation. So these are all the different factors we can look at for the pulses or the pulse ingredients that can be applicable for different types of fermentation and bioengineering. So I like to talk about here some of the typical indigenous products and the cultures here. There are so many examples. I picked 5 of my, basically the typical ones and a couple of my favorite ones. So one of them is the tempeh, and tempeh is a main common staple from Indonesia that can be found parts of in Africa, as well as in India as well. This is a snack and a breakfast food, and it's primarily produced with Aspergillus species and the Rhizopus species. Another product from India is idli, breakfast food, more like a pancake, and it's from India and Sri Lanka. Mainly, we use Lactobacillus species or Pediococcus. There's another African product, like a meat substitute, daladava. This is basically produced with Bacillus species. Another from like India called kaman. This is again produced with the Lactobacillus species, Bacillus or Leconosto. And the one called eftazimo in Greece, more like a fermented chickpea bread in Turkey. This is originated from the island of Crete with the Greek and the Turkish immigrants from there. Now you can see this type of breads in Western Turkey, primarily in all parts of Greece and also in the islands in Greece. And this is basically a product made with the Lactobacillus species. So these are like the typical indigenous products and the cultures that we can use and we can utilize pulses. So if you discuss about, let's say, the tempeh, tempeh can be used as a whole pulse food that's been used over the last several thousands of years and produced with solid state and or semi-solid state fermentation with the Aspergillus species or Rhizopus species. And it can be produced as a direct consume product, whether it's a fried food or meals. But however, there are possibilities that we can transform tempeh into several different ingredient applications, like meat analogs, can be marinated, can be cooked, can be used as a veggie bacon, can be a veggie meat snack, and it can be fried, roasted, and pan-fried. So in a very similar way, by using this fermentation and the forming technology, we can also come up with different type of meat analogs as an alternative to texturization or as an alternative to more coagulation type of process. So that can be another way of coagulation by using the fermentation technique. And if we evolve this process, there may be opportunities for different ingredients to be manufactured and utilized as an ingredient in the marketplace. Another one we can look at is the natto. And I'm talking about non-soybean. And there are so many examples of it with chickpeas, with black beans, with different examples. And I'm showing you some chickpea products. Again, this can be done with solid state or semi-solid state, primarily in this Bacillus species. Right now, it's used as a direct product with meal, as a meal type of product with rice or as is. But by using wet mixing, homogenization, by forming or thermal cooking or frying, that may be another type of analog system that we can use non-soybean nattos as an example of another meat alternative, to use these products as a meat alternative application in the growing plant-based food space. The third one I like to talk about is eftazimo, fermented chickpea bread, because this was my PhD topic that I studied, and this is basically an indigenous fermented chickpea starter culture, which you use in a bread application. You can do this bread with wheat, or you can do it with a gluten-free system. And this is a wheat and chickpea bread, and that chickpea is the critical component for that eftazimo. And eftazimo in Greece, it means derived from aftozimo, meaning self-rising. But also in different areas, it also means kneaded 7 times. So this is produced based on a solid state fermentation like a dough, or it can be more like a liquid, more like a semi-solid state. And again, we use indigenous lactobacillus species. I believe there are some companies working on it in Greece and Turkey, coming up with some starter cultures. And it can be produced by straight dough or multiple mixing and demolding technologies. And it's a direct consumption for bread. But this type of product can be transformed into a starter culture, more like a pulse-based, high protein, probiotic applications, almost like a direct sourdough culture, like a powder star sourdough culture, or almost be part of a whole family of sourdough products. And there are so many different indigenous examples. If you look at the history or different type of gastronomies around the world. So these are some of the examples that we can look at the fermentation in different applications. So if you look at the future food production needs, where are we going? In terms of the food production, we need to be in a position to double the food that we produce right now in 2050. However, we are dealing with pretty much the same arable land. And at the same time, we have pressures on sustainable environment and the sustainable production. We are looking at lowering our input costs, lowering our fertilizer use, potentially coming up with more sustainability benefits, and lowering the pesticides and herbicides and chemicals that we need to use. At the same time, we are trying to produce more healthy and nutritious foods, much less preservatives, and also using much less artificial flavors. So if you basically come up with that whole food production challenge and overall the demands of the food applications, is from here, we need to be really looking at that complete utilization and the circular economy and the different type of co-products. So here we are looking at mainly looking at packaging, wastage, transportation, reduce and reuse or recycle or recover, and the safety for workers. So this is basically driving that entire the food system and the food system challenges. And if you look at the pulse ingredient applications now, we are dealing with several different ingredients coming with so many different co-products, byproducts, or certain select products. So if you go through a cleaning process, we are looking at some biomass and stubble during the harvest or during the cleaning. We are looking at the splitting and dehulling. Then we are looking at pulse hulls, high fiber, low fiber portions of the hulls. Then if you go through the milling and the sifting, we are dealing with different flours. If you go with fine milling and air classification, we have pea protein concentrate and pea starch concentrate. And if you go with the wet milling, like wet fractionation, then we are dealing with pulse protein isolates, pulse starch isolates, inner pulse fiber, and in some cases, some external syrups or different type of products based on the application. So we are looking at over 55, 60 different products coming through the different channels based on the process, based on the flow chart of that application. And when we look at the differences, oil seeds versus pulses, oil seeds has done this over the last 70 years, and they're dealing with a high oil content in a crop, and the main other ingredients are the protein and the carbohydrates. So when oil was the major product to be sold, proteins and the hulls and some fibers, they were the overall co-products, and the protein value proposals established since the 1960s, and the basic research fundamentals, they were like available since about 60s, 70s. Now there's some work going on canola protein and meal value proposals. However, if you look at the peas, lentils, chickpeas, fava beans, and now lupins coming, here we are looking at 20 to 35% protein, 2 to 14% oil, and 35 to 50% starch, 10 to 15% fiber. Right now, the main ingredient is being really needed by the market is the protein. That's the main market driver. And we are looking at different solutions for the starch, oil, fiber fractions. And the value proposals in this development is ongoing for starches and carbohydrates, fibers, and oil fractions. So if you look at this, if you put the protein, starch, flour, fiber, biomass, we are looking at so many different valorization applications, from food and biotech to feed and aquaculture, with bio-based chemicals, with microbial products, bioprocessing technologies, synthetic biology, and omics and advanced ingredients. And that's basically the needed element to basically push the levels of those products at a much higher price, and coming up with more sustainable and then low-cost solutions for these ingredients. So if you think about the pulse proteins as the substrate, if you go after the fermentation, what are certain things that we can do as a overall discussion, more like an ideation phase? If you take them as a food ingredients, we can come up with like modified proteins with the fermentation, come up potentially improved solubility, improved cross-linking, or we can potentially come up with texturized proteins, wet or dry. We can look at precision fermentation for select specialty ingredients. We can look at nutrition like biopeptides or pharma applications, chronic disease treatment, or we can look at industrial uses such as adhesives, bioadhesives, bioplastics, or bioinoculants. Now, the main challenge here will be pulse proteins. They are already quite valuable. There's a need in the market. So what is the value proposition? What's the transformation cost? What's the scale-up potential? What's the commercialization potential? And what's going to be the price? So are we going to need texturization, or are we going to need additional things? So these are really the important factors that we need to think about. And if you think about the pulse protein as the substrate, can we justify that type of high price to utilize it for fermentation or more bioengineering applications? How about if you think about the pulse starches, which is a much lower priced ingredient and more readily available, what type of ingredients we can manufacture by using fermentation bioengineering technologies? We can look at maltodextrins or sweeteners. We can look at industrial alcohols such as ethanol, bioethanol, biobutanol. We can look at precision fermentation more on the specialty ingredients. We can produce protein from starch. We can do organic acids, amino acids, hydrolysates, enzymes. We can produce fats. In terms of nutrition, and we can look at resistant starch, some supplements, peptides. And in the industrial uses, again, we can look at adhesives, bioadhesives, bioplastics, and bioinoculants. And again, when we look at that, then we are starting with like a starch ingredient, which is like much lower price compared to a protein. Then we can think about the value proposition, transformation cost, scale up, commercialization potential, and the price. And we can do the same exercise with the fiber. We can do the same exercise with the hulls or other co-products, byproducts coming from these product streams. So why the fermentation is important for food center, and that's an area that we've been investing thanks to the support of the Ministry of Ag, Prairies Canada, overall the funders and the food center. Thanks to all the support ongoing, we are building a new advanced food ingredients center facility, about 8,000 square feet facility in the south of the building. So this will be ready around June, and we'll be adding fermentation tanks from 2 liter to 10 liter, 200 liter, 1,000 liter, and 10,000 liter. So we'll have 2 10,000 liter reactors here with the fermentation suite as well as the advanced food ingredient suite. So here we'll be offering contract research as a contract manufacturing organization, helping startup companies validate their processes at a scale to produce advanced ingredients for new and innovative applications. We'll provide support from conventional fermentation on the food side, more ethanol or biobutanol or other applications, to biotechnology, mycelial fermentation, and the synthetic biology. Mainly, we'll be serving as an incubator, and we'll be serving as a commercialization arm for the Western Canada, for Canada, as well as in North America and the global schemes, the companies. And we'll be helping them on the upstream and the downstream processing. So we have this schematic for the fermentation scale-up process. We'll be starting from media optimization, going from shake flasks, going to 10 to 20 liters, then going up to 100 liters, then we are going to 1,000 liters, then to 20,000 liters. So Dr. Puba Ganeshan has several years of experience in this field, and right now we have the 50-liter reactor as well as the 10-liter reactor taking some projects, and this area is growing and working around overall different type of co-products and the different type of byproducts and utilizing them in different applications for the industry. And the main goal for the food center is really to support the growing ecosystem in Canada with all the startups supported by GAP, by AgWest Bio, by Ontario Genomics, by Natural Products Canada, as well as Natural Research Council. And we deal with the industry direct by taking all these activities. We would like to close the gap, especially on that scale-up phase for the startups going from 2 to 10 liter, going up to 100 liter, 1,000 liter, and 20,000 liter. And when you think about that, the potential of the pulse ingredients can bring into this operation, into the overall fermentation and the bioengineering business is tremendous. All these products, from starches to air-classified starches, isolated starches, hulls, or the fibers or the flours, there's so many potential with these products as substrates that we can transform them into a food application or different type of ingredient applications or different type of industrial applications. With that, I'd like to thank you for your attention and joining me on this webinar. Again, happy World Pulses Day to all of you. And I'd like to go through some of the questions here and then try to answer your questions. So the first question is, thanks so much for the presentation. When we talk about food science innovation long-term horizon, the most active universities programs are typically outside of Canada. How can the Canadian post-secondary institutions adapt to increase in novel food applications and innovations? I mean, the whole thing about this is really driving the IP and driving the investment in the country. If we can have the metrics around bringing more innovation, bringing more investment, and working in a cluster concept, that's really the key things of around this. I mean, that's the whole point. If we can drive more innovation around working together, working with the big companies, multinationals, small SMEs, large SMEs, startups working together, one person's byproduct can be another person's raw material, and utilizing something locally, more engagement, and bringing the good quality students into this space will be really important for us. The next one is Christelle. We agree that fermentation has several benefits. Did anyone assess the safety of the fermented product in terms of the produced ingredients and their health effect? There's quite a bit of work in that. There's several books published, a lot of GRAS data, and in general, really the pH and several things is the main factor there when we think about the food safety and the processing technologies, as well as the hurdle technologies. So in that area, there's been quite a bit of work going on since, like I should say, mid-80s in Berlin Technical University. Dr. I believe Leistner, he's done a lot of work on hurdle technologies, combining the effect of fermentation or other benefits. And also there's been quite a bit of work in that space done also in North America, Canada, and other parts of the world, in Spain as well. The next one is what financial HR support is granted or funded by Canadian federal provincial government for such projects. There is some support coming to these projects, but like there's a lot of activities going on also in terms of business development. It's just a matter of like the type of the project and whether it's an open innovation that the entire ecosystem can benefit, or whether it's mainly driven by like a whole globe, like a more provincial effort that can drive, that we can drive here and then bring all the companies as part of that research effort as well. So let me go back to the chat box. There's some questions there. Are there any specific domesticated strains that you typically use for fermentation, or is it consortium of microbes, or is it substrate specific? Benjamin, to that question, there are several factors possible. It can be a domesticated strain, it can be indigenous, like a mix of microorganisms, or it's substrate specific. In that one, we are basically the stewards of our clients or stewards of that particular project. In this area is a matter of it's really driven by the project owners or the project initiators. All of those factors are possible. We can use whether substrate specific or a consortium of microbes. In general, the food center does like about 90% work confidential, but we have about 10% work. We partner with university, different institutes, AFC, NRC, and different organizations in Canada. And with that one, with some of the things that we can answer, but in general, this is driven by the companies and by our clients. Going to the next one is, have you developed any bioplastic in your food center lab? Those type of projects are ongoing. We have partnership with University of Saskatchewan, Dr. Bishnu Karki, Bishnu Acharya, I believe. Dr. Bishnu at University of Saskatchewan, working in this field, mainly coming up different type of solutions, and we'll be helping Dr. Bishnu's efforts with the University of Saskatchewan. In that area, there's quite a bit of joint efforts happening in the province, so that work is ongoing. How fiber can play an effective role in fermentation? That's mainly for the gut health and the fermentation in the human overall pet food health. There are so many factors there. It's mainly the fermentation, the bifidobacters, and overall the gut health. That's quite important, mainly. In terms of the fermentation and the bioengineering space, the hulls and the fibers can be utilized. That's another area that we can look at. So there's a huge potential in that. It's just a matter of the type of the microorganisms. Can we break the fibers, the cellulose or the cellulosic materials? And how can we come up with the processes which will make sense financially with the right transformation costs? That will be the important factor there. Benjamin, another question. Do you have a library of GRAS IP-free strains that you can share? We don't have a library. We are working with different groups. As I tried to mention, the Food Center is a commercialization arm. We are not doing the research. We don't have a library of the IP-free strains. We are working with different groups. They are coming to us. We are working with a technology transfer agreement type of, and then under confidentiality agreements. And we work with different groups around the world with different libraries that we can bring these products. So that's mainly the way that we operate and try to help the industry and our clients. So with that, I'd like to thank you for all your attention today. With all your questions answered, thank you very much for joining. And wishing you a great World Pulses Day and have a great weekend. Thank you.